So, 2013 was a crazy, crazy year. Had some great laughs, hung out with some awesome people, and that one thing. Yeah, it was a year full of ponies. Because it did go on to influence some of the craziest videos I've ever made. However, along the way there were some hiccups I've been meaning to acknowledge, and what better time than at the start of a fresh new year. For example, in my Sins of the Past video, I talk about the G1, G2, and G3 series. However, it came to my knowledge after I released the video that there was no G2 cartoon, and My Little Pony Tales was just another version of G1. G2 was actually just a different variation of the toys, and the only media available that is considered G2 is some PC game. And G3? Not even a TV show. They were actually direct-to-video releases. And I didn't even rate them. Where I gave G1 a 7 out of 10 and I gave G2 a 5 out of 10, I never really said what G3 and G3.5 were, which would be a 1 out of 10 and a 0 out of 10, so why even bother mentioning it? But perhaps my strangest mistake was in my very first video. Just a quick little FYI to clear things up. At the beginning of this video I talked about having to review this again. Well, that's because this video was supposed to be a part 2 to a video I had previously been working on. Yes, I never forgot. This was a long time ago, and the unreleased video was created way back in April 2013, so I think it's appropriate to go back and revisit where it all started. What the heck does any of this have to do with My Little Pony? Did I just kill a guy? Who are all these people? Other than the 2 times I show My Little Pony for a couple seconds, this video has nothing to do with the show. It's like something out of a horror film. Well, as a matter of fact, it was supposed to be a horror-esque movie. This video was made a couple days before I even saw episode 1. The story was supposed to be about a guy who watches one episode, becomes hooked, and begins to realize that the show is always on his mind. His action-adventure dreams turned into peaceful and friendship-oriented dreams, much to his dismay. He wakes up only to find that his nightmare isn't over. It was essentially joking about the myth that if you watch one episode you'll be hooked. However, shortly after filming that pool scene, one of the pool actors asked what exactly the herd was. After explaining the joke, he told me to watch the show before finishing the video to justify making it in the first place. I realized I messed up hardcore after watching the first season because the joke had lost its meaning to me. I had become that character in my video in some way. And it's funny to note that I've never been able to put to words what it is about the show that was actually good. Other than comparing it to shows with a similar feel, I never gave it a proper review. People constantly kept asking me if I was serious or not, or if I even really liked the show to begin with. It was clear that this first review followed the cinematic over-the-top approach that I've become accustomed to using. And a big part of the problem is that I really can't put to words what exactly was good about it. Even to this day, when people ask what I like about it, I can't really answer properly. The best I can think of is that it's a really well put together show with interesting stories and characters. But even then, I don't know. While the stories are interesting in that they deal with real personal issues, they were all extremely predictable. For example, a mysterious character shows up to town and everyone's afraid of talking to it. Obviously the lesson was going to be, don't judge before you understand it. Or one character doesn't like reading because she thinks reading is for nerds. Obviously the lesson was going to be, don't go Metal Gear Solid status to steal the book so that no one knows you actually enjoy reading? Which brings me to my first point. Perhaps the predictable nature of the show worked to its benefit. As a kid growing up, one of the shows I watched regularly was Arthur. It followed similar stories in that they reflected real-life situations. However, for example, in an episode where the Peanut Twins wanted to learn how to behave, it was pretty clear to see how the episode would resolve itself. They'd struggle and eventually solve this issue while teaching kids the proper ways to do it. With MLP, almost every episode had something that surprised me. Take, for example, an episode about a wedding. A royal wedding, no less. It goes into full-on brawl mode with some humor thrown into the mix. And of course, with a show of this nature, one would always expect the protagonist to come out on top, whether it is succeeding over the conflict or learning something that is greater than beating the conflict. But fortunately, it always has some kind of element, or reference, or moment that keep things fresh. It's the little moments that build up the experience. So I previously mentioned that the show is full of interesting characters. Twilight Sparkle, Rainbow Dash, Pinkie Pie, Rarity, Applejack, Fluttershy, Apple Bloom, Sweetie Belle, Scootaloo, Discord, Luna, Celestia, Soren, Spitfire, Cadence, Spike, Photofish, Derpy, Lyra, Bonbon, Babsy, Big Mac, Granny Smith, Zecora, and the list goes on. See, that wasn't so bad. I can say. Anyway, they're all good in their own right, but perhaps one of the biggest aspects I never went over about this show were the villains. Which is funny because there aren't many to begin with. There are a lot of antagonists that are met throughout the series, but none that I would consider to be villains. That role is filled by Nightmare Moon, Discord, Queen Chrysalis, King Sombra, and Weed. Okay, that last one wasn't a villain, but it did take up the spot during the episodes where villains were usually introduced. Episodes with villains were mostly reserved for the first or last episodes of a season. These episodes were usually two-part episodes as well. I won't go into details, but basically the villains each have their own merit. But perhaps the most interesting villain is Discord. This guy is absolutely nuts. And the funny thing is that he's not really evil. He just likes messing with everything and everyone. He's introduced in the season 2 opener but returns in later episodes and in my opinion is constantly stealing the show. And apart from the villains, there are a multitude of side characters that are each fun in their own way. Take for example these three. They're funny from how ridiculous the situations they get into. In one scene, they can't build a table, but in a later episode they single-handedly build a booby-trapped float in one night. It's just one of those shows that have many individual moments that are unforgettable. However, if there's one thing that deserves praise that I've never mentioned before, is the way it looks. Now I'm not talking about the animation or the way they move, just simply how it looks. There's so much color. And finally, the point that is most controversial in my mind to praise is the music. You see, the music has that general quality that you would expect from a kids show intended for little girls. A sort of lameness, as some people would call it. Except I wouldn't necessarily call it lame. Songs that I initially disliked and had me rolling my eyes would eventually worm into my brain, make a nest, and call it home. But what does that say about the actual quality? Songs are designed to be catchy, but that doesn't mean they're good. When you look between the lines and inspect the lyrics and realize what it's about, a song that may have seemed good to hear may suddenly be, well, stupid. And in this case, after checking out the lyrics, they're not that bad. Some advance the story and tell the audience what's going on, others develop character and tell the audience how the characters are feeling, and they've done a good job here. And what's rather embarrassing to discover is that the guy who puts these sounds together has stated that he writes with the target demographic in mind, not the older fans. So in other words, if he's writing for 6-year-old children, and he knows that these 6-year-old children are his target demographic audience that will be listening to his music should be sounding something like this. Yes, like this isn't an insult to the mental capabilities of children. On one side you have this. No, I do not love the groom. In my heart there is no room. And on the other you have. My point is, this makes me think of something that I can relate with video game music. I'm talking about games from the way back years like Super Nintendo, times when the music wasn't supposed to be anything more than just filling in the desolate and empty background as you play the game. But then every now and then comes a composer who has talent and passion for what he or she is doing, put those things together, and you get music that is undeniably great. And in the case of the My Little Pony composer guy, although he knows he's writing for 6-year-old girls, it's clear to see that this is a guy who has passion and talent for what he's doing. And as a result, he has created stuff that could be considered to be catchy and good music, which at the end of the day is something that can be universally accepted. Whether you like or dislike the lyrics, genre being adapted, or the themes within the song, it's pretty clear why the music has been praised by the fans. It's done by someone who does it because he likes it. He doesn't hold back because he knows that it's only 6-year-old kids listening, and that's the difference between a song that is catchy just for the sake of being catchy and a song that has fundamental skill backing it up. And for that, I consider this common praise to be a valid argument for why some people of all ranging ages like this show. It has something for everyone. Whether you like the animation, music, characters, story, or whatever, the one consistent thing behind it all is that it was clearly a product of staff members with a passion. They know who the intended audience is, but instead of cutting corners assuming that the kids would be too young to care, these people went above and beyond what was expected. Like video game music, which was never deemed possible to ever receive a huge following with soundtracks and full orchestra adaptations, these people who worked on Friendship is Magic took the impossible, creating a show for 6-year-old girls designed to sell toys and make it something that everyone could enjoy, and they made it possible. So that ends this little review of the show and finally puts the final cap on this little tune. If you don't like the show, that's fine, but I wouldn't go around judging the fans before actually watching the show because, who knows, maybe you'll end up in a recycling bin too.
Oh!